Meet the top 10 wealthiest individuals of contemporary era, ranging from the proprietor of Louis Vuitton to the originator of Microsoft. Their combined wealth is greater than the economies of Norway and Austria combined. At the same time, today, 700 million people survive below the poverty line. It would seem that the world has long put an end to slavery and feudalism, but inequality has only intensified. 1% of the population possesses 50% of the total wealth worldwide. Each individual at the top of the pyramid earns over $1 million per year, while half of the people on the planet are satisfied with only 1% of the economic pie. How did it occur? To comprehend, we must go back in time by 200 years in order to gain understanding. Until the 18th century, land was the main source of wealth and it belonged to the nobility, privileged group of individuals. Almost all of the population are peasants who worked on someone else's land and barely managed to make ends meet. By the start of the 19th century, the world is changing. The emergence of new technologies, the development of trade and credit, and the growth of cities led to the decline of the feudal system and provoked the Industrial Revolution. New enterprises and industries of the European economy needed fuel, which was found among less successful and strong neighbors. Using their military and technological power, European states, including Great Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands, captured territories in Asia, Africa, and America, and began extracting resources from there, from gold and diamonds to coffee and tobacco. Using cheap labor of the natives, getting rid of their goods in the colony, Europe was rapidly getting richer. Each empire used its own levers of pressure, but Britain, the global economic leader of that time, particularly excelled in this. India was the jewel of the British Empire. Enormous reserves of raw materials, advantageous geographical location, and a large population made India the most valuable colony in the world, which the British fully exploited. Here's one of the examples. In the mid-19th century, there was a boom in the textile industry. Mechanical weaving machines started to be widely used, productivity increased, and there was a shortage of raw materials. Therefore, Britain imposed a ban on the export of Indian cotton to other countries and began to purchase it in its colony at monopolistically low prices. The export ban on India's primary commodity has resulted in widespread poverty, as workers in the crucial sector of date farmers have lost their means of livelihood. Is it necessary to mention that Britain, by buying Indian cotton at low prices, then sold finished products to India at higher prices in the global market? The legacy of colonial economy was felt for many years after India declared independence. By the end of the 20th century, half of the country's population lived below the poverty line. But if India is now recovering from the poverty trap, most African countries have remained in the same situation. What's wrong with them? Let's take Nigeria, the richest country on the continent in terms of oil reserves. It would seem that with the main global resource, one can build a strong economy. However, few succeed in doing so because countries are subject to the resource curse. Nigeria's problem worsened by a third of national black gold extracted not by Nigerian entrepreneurs, but by transnational corporations like Shell and Total. To give you an overall picture, African revenues of transnational corporations are 3 times higher than the amount of international aid received by the entire continent. Colonial relations have not made any progress. They have simply undergone a transformation. Powerful economies are relocating their factories to impoverished nations, where they employ inexpensive local labor and exploit affordable local resources. As a result, the residents of African countries south of the Sahara are not just poor, they are destitute, literally surviving on $2 a day. Okay, we dealt with the richest countries, these are mainly former colonies, but what about the rest of the world? Choose any European nation and compare it to Congo or Somalia. The contrast, of course, will be clearly evident. But that doesn't mean there are no poor people in Europe or America. Just this poverty is different. If a resident of Congo cannot buy a car, he does not worry because everyone walks there. However, a resident of a European country without money for a car will be considered relatively poor, and such poverty is well disguised. Perhaps you don't even notice her anymore. In the most developed countries in the world, with the exception of a dozen small super-rich states, most people cannot afford to buy a house without a mortgage, maintain 2 cars per family, or fly on vacation every month. And nothing much changes in your life. To understand how the life of an ordinary citizen changes with economic growth, you need to look at how the economic success of the last decades has spread. Economists use the Gini index for this purpose. The closer it is to 1, the higher the income stratification of people. The closer to 0, the smoother everyone lives. So, global dynamics of the Gini index shows that inequality has increased over the past 200 years. That is, the global economy is undoubtedly getting richer, but not for everyone. And how does this inequality manifest itself in practice? Most of our wealth, yours and mine, consists of bank deposits and real estate. However, among the top 10% of the richest people, the structure of assets is completely different. They own a real business. Real estate is only a third of their wealth, and financial assets occupy the largest share of wealth. And the richer people are, the higher this share. Rich people don't spend their income when they increase it because it doesn't make sense. They already have enough for their lives. Their wealth increases due to the growth in financial asset value, and most of us, after receiving an increase, will increase our consumption to escape relative poverty, buy a new phone, upgrade a car, or purchase an apartment. Do you feel the difference? So let's introduce progressive taxes, says the advanced viewer. Taxes are indeed the main tool of equalization. But throughout the 20th century, it gradually affected the poor specifically. Here's how it happened. During the period from 1950 to 1980, the average income tax rate on high incomes in developed countries was 72%, and in the United Kingdom, it reached as high as 95%. Well, it's like if you earned $1 million a month, but gave $950,000 to the state. Naturally, the rich began to evade these taxes by transferring their money to those very financial assets and offshore companies. The Laffer curve functioned. When tax rates become excessively high, individuals would prefer to take the chance of going to prison rather than willingly pay such large sums. As a result, the maximum rates have decreased and now stand at an average of 40%. However, in order to offset the reduction, consumption taxes were increased, placing a burden on the less affluent members of society. Unlike the wealthy, the poor can't dissolve their business, buy a company share, or acquire expensive art to hide income like the rich can with ease. The main sources of income for most people are salaries and pensions, taxes from which are automatically deducted, and the remaining money has to be almost entirely spent on living expenses by the middle class and the poor. It turns out some kind of vicious circle. Former and current colonies are doomed to poverty, while developed countries are mired in inequality. Can anything be done about this? In fact, the situation is changing. In the early 90s, 38% of the world's population lived below the poverty line, and today only 8%. Due to the past 30 years, particularly the 2000s, the global economy has grown, the internet has emerged, and education has become more accessible. But the successes of recent years are more modest, which means that poverty will decrease more slowly. Poor countries struggle to break free from the colonial trap. In these nations, children lack access to education due to the absence of quality schools and the need to prioritize fetching clean water and food instead of studying. For countries with any kind of economy, politics becomes an obstacle. Long-standing territorial conflicts and corrupt officials who try to grab as much as possible in their short lifetime nullify all chances of the country's escape from poverty. No one will ever invest in such an economy, indicating that without a strong leader, who preferably discovers oil on their territory or utilizes another unique resource, it is impossible to escape the poverty trap. When a country overcomes absolute poverty, it enters relative poverty because higher indicators of economic success do not in any way mean equal distribution of wealth. Remember Nigeria, the wealthiest African country in terms of GDP. Among wealthy countries, only Northern Europe has relatively equal living standards. High taxes, as we have found out, only exacerbate inequality. Therefore, other economic levers should be used. And it cannot be said that states are not working in this direction. They set a minimum wage, allocate quotas for free education, try to regulate antitrust, but progress is slow. Mainly due to the fact that the wealthy elite continues to be the driving force behind significant economic decisions, advancing their own interests. You must be a realist. You can solely escape relative poverty independently. Regardless of your location, obtain an education and continuously acquire new knowledge. These are not empty words, but the only way to become a sought-after worker and break free from the trap of poverty. Do not wait for the weather by the sea and for someone to come and give you a suitcase of money. Modern economy is a struggle for one's piece of the pie, and today you will have to take it yourself.